This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil markets on Monday shrugged off U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to hit buyers of Russian oil with tariffs as the shock value of the barrage of threats from the White House begins to wear thin with jaded traders. Trump's off-the-cuff proposal to hit any country buying Russian oil with a 25% to 50% tariff would be significant for oil markets if it turned into an order, but analysts and traders questioned whether the president's latest threat was serious. There's an element of fatigue with the announcements from the U.S. administration on tariffs and sanctions, said ING's head of commodities strategy Warren Patterson.
U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to impose secondary tariffs of 25% to 50% on buyers of Russian crude oil is just crazy and bold enough to perhaps achieve his stated aim of a ceasefire in Ukraine. What matters now is the reaction of the other three key players to this latest move by the mercurial and inconsistent U.S. leader. Do Russian President Vladimir Putin, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping believe that Trump will actually follow through? And if he does, what will it mean for their energy situation?
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
The year is still young, but Asia has already built up a considerable lead over several European countries and the United States in terms of energy transition progress so far in 2025. Large Asian nations including China, India, South Korea and Japan all reduced fossil fuel use and boosted clean power output by more than their international peers in early 2025, according to data from energy think tank Ember. Indeed, while most of Asia made cuts to fossil fuel use for electricity production in January from the same month in 2024, the US and Europe have both expanded fossil fuel-fired generation, thereby reversing their transition momentum.
Australia's mining and energy export earnings are expected to fall 6% in the financial year through June, with prices of its key iron ore shipments declining, the government said on Monday. Profits are forecast fall to $387 billion Australian dollars, $243 billion, from $415 billion Australian dollars the previous year due to the impact of lower US dollar prices for our resource and energy exports, the Department of Industry said in its quarterly resources and energy outlook. The forecast decline was smaller than the 10% drop predicted in December. Further modest falls in earnings are likely over the 5-year outlook, steadying at $343 billion Australian dollars near the end of that period, the report said. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold breached the $3,100 level on Monday to touch an all-time high as investors turn to the safe haven asset amid concerns that U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff plans would widen the global trade war and trigger an economic fallout. Spot gold added 0.9% to $3,110.81 an ounce as of 0444 GMT after hitting a record high of $3,115.79 earlier. Bullion has gained more than 8% in March. The dollar index eased 0.2%, making greenback-priced gold less expensive for buyers holding other currencies.
Copper prices in London fell to a 2-week low on Monday on heightened concerns about a global trade war, as US President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs loomed. The benchmark 3-month copper on the London Metals Exchange lost 0.4% to $9,760 per metric ton as of 0330 GMT. Trump announced on Sunday that the reciprocal tariffs he plans to introduce this week will apply to all nations.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago soybean futures hit a record high since March 10, driven by domestic demand prospects from biofuels policy talks, but Brazil's bumper harvest and U.S. tariff concerns limited gains. The most active soybean contract on the Chicago Board of Trade gained 0.15% to $10.24 a bushel, the highest since March 10 and marking a third straight session of gains as of 0207 GMT. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has asked oil and biofuels producers to hash out a deal on the next phase of the nation's biofuels policy, Reuters reported last week. That is all for today. today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.